Interviewing and doing solo episodes are two different arts. So I will be very honest, doing these solo episodes when it's just me by myself and I don't have my co-host Alan is a challenge. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we help you maximize your podcast. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode, and by we, I mean I'm very used to saying that for Alan and myself in our other podcast. I hope you enjoyed our latest episode number 4, a simple framework for powerful solo episodes. I took you through the hook, story, lesson, future pace, as well as the question, call to action, all of that happy jazz. Today for episode number 5, should you be doing solo episodes? Should you be doing guest episodes? Should you be doing both? I think for many of us, when we start a podcast, we look around and we see what other people are doing, and we say to ourselves, okay, cool, that's what I should be doing. My goal in this episode is to help you understand the difference between a solo episode and a guest episode in terms of the intention, right? So obviously a solo episode is you jumping on the microphone, you jumping on the camera, and talking directly to your audience. Having a guest is you interviewing them. But a lot of people don't understand the difference between the two when it comes to the behind the scenes intention. So early in our journey, again, we are, as of this recording, I think we have recorded 1,050 episodes. Check us out. Next Level University is the name of that show. But in the very beginning, we started with guest interviews. That was our focus. We said, look, we're going to do guest interviews because we're going to meet people and they're going to share our stuff, and that'll be the best way for us to get new listens. Eventually, it got to the point where we said, okay, well, we want to do more episodes. So I think we started, like everybody else, with 1 a week. And eventually we went to 2 and 3 and 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 7, an episode every single day. But eventually it got to the point where we said, well, we're not going to do 3 guest interviews a week. Not only is that a logistical nightmare from behind the scenes, scheduling, editing, all that happy jazz, but we wanted to talk about what we wanted to talk about. So this is the important understanding. When I am talking to clients, I always say this, and a lot of times this is what happens. A client will come to me and they will say, my main focus, my main goal right now is to figure out how do I monetize my podcast. And I always ask this question, are you doing solo episodes? Are you doing guest episodes? Or are you doing both? And the vast majority of the time, the person says, I'm doing guest episodes only. Okay. And this is exactly what I tell them. The value of a solo episode is this. You are talking directly to your audience about the problems that they have that you can ultimately help them solve. So think of it this way. This episode, right? This is a really good analogy and a great example. And I'm always going to try to take you behind the scenes with my example. This episode is focused on me helping you with your podcast. If you are interested in learning more, you will reach out to me because I am the one adding value. So the solo episodes are a great way to eventually get clients, because what you do is you figure out, okay, going back to what episode was it? Episode number 3, we talked about understanding your ideal listener. Okay. When you understand your ideal listener, you can say, okay, what are the problems that my listeners are going through? Cool. Let me sit down. Let me write out my script. Let me write out my hook, story, lesson, future pace, question, challenge, call to action. Let me write all those out and let me do this episode. You are adding value, a high level of value, directly to your audience based on what you know they need. Then you can always have your own little plug where you say, hey, if this episode was valuable and you want to get even more value, click the link in my show notes and it'll take you to a free 30-minute call or whatever your version of that is. So when somebody comes to me and says, well, I'm not getting any clients from my podcast, I always say this, you have to start doing solo episodes. And this is a big reason why. When you're having guests on, the energetic understanding is that the guest is ahead of you. So if you have me on your podcast, just as an example, and you're talking about Kevin's got 1,000 episodes and a multi six-figure business and blah, 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 your listeners are more than likely going to reach out to me before they reach out to you, especially if they want to start a podcast. But imagine if you did a solo episode and you talked directly to their needs. So from my perspective, from my experience, from what has worked for us and many of our clients, understanding that when you do a solo episode, you are quite literally saying, hey, this is a problem that you are dealing with. I am going to help you solve it in this episode. And if you want more value, if you want more of your problem solved, if you want more awareness, please click the link in the show notes and we can hop on a free call. And if it's aligned, we'll work together. Okay? That is what I have seen as the most valuable part of the solo episodes. Now, a couple other things. One, they're usually far easier to edit. Two, you can do them whenever you want because you don't have to worry about somebody else's schedule. Three, you can name them exactly what you want. And at some point, I'll do an episode on the importance of titles. We have a spreadsheet where we created an algorithm to figure out what are the most clickable titles that we've ever created. So at some point, we'll do an episode on that. But the solo episodes just give you the opportunity to be way more creative, way more flexible, and honestly, it's just way more sustainable. So don't be afraid to do solo episodes, especially if you're trying to eventually use your podcast as a part of your business where you're going to get clients. That is exactly what I would do if I was you. And, money is a part of the goal for your podcast. Okay. When and why do you do guest episodes? Couple reasons. One, if you're into the podcast game so you can build relationships with people, great. Obviously, having guests on your show is a great opportunity. What I will tell you is I am sold to way less than ever, but I have been sold to more than a handful of times where we get to the end of the interview and the person says, hey, how do we collaborate together? And I always try to respectfully say, thank you, I appreciate that, but we just stay in our lane and I do not have any intention of collaborating. It's just not something we're doing. I'm not podcasting to network. I'm podcasting for impact, for mastery, to build the business, right? To have the impact that we're trying to have. But and nothing against you doing that. If you're looking to network and meet people, obviously having guests is a great way to do it. I believe having guests is the best way to get listens, especially in the beginning, because this is what you're doing. You're getting introduced to new eyes. So all you do, and again, I'm going to do another episode as well on what do you do after you drop your episode. So what are the behind the scenes that we do every single time we drop an episode? But you drop your episode. Hopefully you're creating some sort of social media content, even if it's just pictures. Put it on your Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you're using, TikTok, and then tag the person who was on the episode. Hopefully they'll share it, and you might get 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 new eyes. Awesome. So that is one of the best ways, honestly, to get new listeners is to have a guest on who has an audience that you've never spoken to. Hopefully you do a powerful, positive interview, and they're likely to share your stuff, and then those people then become at least aware of you. But when it comes to making money...
Hi there, this is Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and I am the host of the Business of Happiness podcast, which would not be in existence were it not for the one and only incredible Kevin Palmieri. Seriously, I am so indebted to Kevin for the service that he provides. Every week he meets with me. He has been coaching me on how to initiate and launch this podcast. He helped me put it together with his great expertise, and every week his whole team works tirelessly to get these podcasts uploaded to Buzzsprout and to deliver my content to my audience. I am so grateful. I couldn't say enough about him. In fact, we've been working together so well. I've seen so much wonderful input from my listeners and asking me for more that in just a few weeks, we're going to be doubling the number of podcasts we produce per week. So this trajectory is just flying, and I'm really enjoying the whole process. So I couldn't say enough about him. please, if this is something you're considering, I highly recommend him. And reach out to me anytime if you have any questions about our experience. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Having guests really helps when you get to the upper echelon type of guests. And if you're looking for sponsorships, if you're looking for ads, yes, having big guests on is going to be very helpful. But honestly, most people don't get to that point, right? So with our podcast, Next Level University, we're doing 20,000 downloads a month. And we could definitely get sponsorships. We could definitely get ads, but it wouldn't even be worth it for us to sell that space to somebody else. It's actually more valuable for us to just promote our own stuff because there's a lot of numbers behind it. But last time I checked, and it's been a minute, the sponsorships, I believe, were giving anywhere from $25 to $50 per 1,000 downloads. So again, it's just not ideal. Like for us, what would that be? $1,000 a month? You know, maybe that's what you're looking for. Maybe you just want to supplement your income or cover your costs, but I'll have to double check. But last time I checked, I believe it was $25 to $50 per 1,000. It was either per 1,000 or per 10,000. But again, that strategy of sponsorships and ads will not work for most people, especially in the short run. And that's why I'm very big on using your podcast to help you get one-on-one clients, really, because you have to think your podcast is going to be valuable. Whatever you're talking about, if it's in a direct alignment with what you coach on or the products or the services or the courses or the retreats or the events, that's how you can really build a business. As much as I'd like to say that a podcast is 10 out of 10 valuable, there's only so much value you can pour into a podcast because you're talking to a large group of people and everybody is somewhere different in their journey, right? So if you already knew what I said, you've already turned off the podcast. If you didn't know, now you're thinking, oh, okay, cool. That's something that I didn't know. That's a new piece of awareness for me. And that's the ultimate goal. And then eventually, maybe when I start a private Facebook group, you'll come to the Facebook group because it's more value. You get to see me behind the scenes. Then eventually, if I do a masterclass, maybe you'll say, oh, you know what? I think it's worth doing that because it's more valuable. I'm willing to pay for that. And then eventually you might say, oh, I want to work one-on-one with Kevin because it's more valuable and he can help me with my specific problems at this current time. So guests are a great way to get exposure. I will be very honest. It is very different than it was 5.5 years ago when we started our show. The algorithms, there's a lot of things that are different now. It's easier to get on podcasts than it's ever been, so people aren't sharing the promotion as much as they used to. But if you're early, I always suggest you start with 1 episode a week, and you can do it this way. You can do a solo episode 1 week. You can do a guest episode the next week. You can do a solo episode and a guest episode. And in the guest episode, your goal is to be the best interviewer possible. That is your goal, and I'm going to do an episode on that in the very near future. I believe the next one. On the solo episodes, your goal is to add as much value as humanly possible to your audience. And if you do that long enough and you have places in your business where people can go, then that's how you get one-on-one clients. But I want you to think of your podcast as a business. So you have social media where people often will find your podcast. If somebody comes and follows you on social media, maybe they'll listen to your podcast. After they listen to your podcast, where can they go next, right? Because for most people, it's not going to be straight from they listen to your podcast to they give you money. So maybe it's a Facebook group, maybe it's a freebie, maybe it's a live virtual podcast. Just understand that you should have, most podcasts have like 4 layers to their business model. So they have social media at the very top of their business. They have the podcast underneath it. They have a freebie, and then they have paid. But it's very hard to take somebody from podcast to paid. So really think about this. If you're listening to me and you've heard 5 episodes thus far, the odds of you reaching out and saying, hey, here's $100, $200, $500 of my money is pretty low. But if you listen to this long enough, if you join a Facebook group, if you join a masterclass, if you jump on a free call, then our relationship is at a strong enough point where you might say, you know what, I'm going to pay Kev money for blank. So that's an important understanding. And the solo episodes and guest episodes both play into that. The last thing I'll say, though, is this. Interviewing and doing solo episodes are two different arts. So I will be very honest, doing these solo episodes when it's just me by myself and I don't have my co-host Alan is a challenge because I've done 1,050 episodes with somebody else on the other side of the microphone as a co-host. And this is definitely a challenge, but it forces you to become a better speaker. It forces you to understand how to hold space. So it's going to allow you to become a better speaker overall. And then being an interviewer, that's completely different. And again, I don't want to go into it here, but the next episode, I will talk about becoming a better interviewer. We have gotten many, many, many nice compliments from some very successful people in our industry about our interviewing skills. And I think a lot of it just comes to prep work. So we'll talk about that in the next episode. But that is my goal with this episode. Understand solo episodes are really good for you to build your brand and for you to talk directly to your listener and figure out, okay, how do I solve a problem that they're going through? And it's also to help you build an intimate relationship with your listeners. And then the guest side of things is really impactful and important to ultimately grow your show, bring new listeners to your platform, to your social media, to your podcast, to your Facebook groups, whatever you have. And then it's also a great opportunity to network and build the interview skills. Podcast growth nation, if you are a podcaster and maybe you are at the end of your rope with editing all of your stuff, maybe you want to learn how to make more money and figure out what we've done to do that, I am going to have our amazing team put my link for a 30-minute free podcast breakthrough session in the show notes. And it is totally free. I'm not going to try to sell you on anything. My goal is to add as much value as humanly possible. If we get to the end of the call and you say, hey, how much is audio editing? How much is video editing? I'm happy to share all of those numbers with you, and maybe we'll work together. If not, that's not why I'm doing it. I just want to add as much value as I can. I believe that there are many people out there who are capable of creating very positive, very mission-driven, very impactful podcasts. But a lot of people quit long before they build that consistency and they build up that momentum. So click the link in the show notes if you want a free 30-minute call with me. I would love to chat with you. And again, it's very humbling starting a new podcast from scratch. It's been 5.5 years since I've done it. This is definitely a blast. I love talking about podcasts. I love talking to podcasters, and it's a pretty small world, all things considered. Yeah, there might be 3.5 or 4 million podcasts at this point, but many people have already called it quits. I think the stat is 75% of the shows that are out there are no longer actually active. So if you're an active podcast and you're an active podcaster, give yourself a pat on the back because it's not as easy as people make it seem. And I know the challenges that go into that every single day. So again, if you're interested in a free call, click the link in the show notes. Next week, for next Friday's episode, we are going to talk about becoming a better interviewer. So again, for a long time, we were doing at least one interview a week. And I don't know, we've done hundreds of interviews at this point. And I can tell you that there is a certain way to go about an interview. And being interviewed at this point probably 300 times, I can tell you exactly what people are doing wrong. I can tell you the interviews that I get off of and say, oh, wow, that person is going to go places. And I can tell you the things that hop up pretty quickly where I can tell this person didn't do their research. So episode 6 is focused on becoming a better interviewer. You never know how much value you can add by being a better interviewer, and you never know the opportunities that may present themselves based on your interviewing skills. I will share a couple stories about that. As always, thank you all so very much. Keep on podcasting. I hope this is adding value to you. If it is, if you would be kind enough to leave me a review, I would appreciate it very, very, very much. And I appreciate you all. Happy Friday. I will talk to you all next week.